Okay, good afternoon, everybody. It's Rabbi Kolakowski here again. This morning I wanted to talk something about Parshas Parah, about the laws of and the reading of the laws of the red heifer from Numbers 19 that we read liturgically this coming Shabbos, and the power of Torah, which is truly awesome. I discussed in the previous video that I had started discussing this and didn't quite finish. The thing that I quoted when I said it was Parshas Shmini was actually Parshas Tazria. So I made a mistake, and I admit the mistake. The reason I made the mistake was because, I conflated Shmini, the 8th day, with the day of Isha Ki Tazria, or Losev Yom Shmini. That's what I should have made it. I make a lot of mistakes, so that's just me. So I want to admit that when I'm wrong. It's next week's parsha. Ooh, what's that? Is that a beaver or an otter? What kind of animal is that? I think it looks. I don't know. I mean, yesterday when I was driving, I saw what I thought was a mama bear and some baby bears, and as I kind of looked closely, I realized I think they were actually feral pigs. We have, feral wild boars. I mean, I guess this would be a sow and not a boar. It looked like it was a mommy with the babies, but because it looked too small to be a mama bear. Excuse me. But and the way they were grazing, it kind of looked like more like pigs, but they were black. And there are black pigs. I think the pigs around here are more like gray. They're what they call the razorback pigs. I think they're considered a pest animal where I live in Bethel, New York. And I didn't know that they had spread that far and wide because they do a lot of damage. That what I saw looked too small to be a beaver, though. More like maybe it was a muskrat. I don't know. Anyway, talk about Parshas Parah. I get distracted so easily. I have like severe ADD. Excuse me. So this was something I was thinking about this morning after reading, the daily halacha emails that I get from, I think it's also from Yeshiva Teres Shimon, where they send the daily halacha emails. And I've been getting these for years, and they're the same ones every year, but it's nice to have that quick review. It's in English. Not that I need the English, it makes a little, to read quickly 2 little halachic insights every day. It's a nice thing to have. Anyway, they were talking about Parshas Parah and how everyone agrees that women are exempt from Parshas Parah, and it's a machlokes, it's a dispute as to whether or not the reading of Parshas Parah is midoraisa or midorabbanan, whether it's a biblical obligation or a rabbinical obligation. And what would be the reason that it would be a biblical obligation? I mean, I never really learned that sugya inside. I know it's a very complicated sugya between the various Rishonim and Achronim. These questions about the Arba Parshios, and it's a sugya I would like to learn. But this question as to whether it's the Raisa or Albanan, what's even the Havamina, where do we understand that? And the idea is that before you bring a Korban Pesach, before you make the pilgrimage to Jerusalem to offer the Paschal offering on Passover, you have to be purified. Right? And the mode of purification includes if anybody was in contact with the dead, and we assume they might have, either visited a cemetery or even passed under a tree that passed over a cemetery, like on Main Street in Queens. I don't understand how such a big Jewish community doesn't have the power to get rid of those trees on Main Street over by the cemetery there. The Kohanim just can't drive over there. It's incredible. And it's right near the Frum community. Super Sol, whatever is right there. I think it's something else now. Maybe it's Seasons. I don't know. I think Seasons is the one on. I don't know. They whatever it is. You have a, Naomi's is over there also, right? I wonder if is it still Naomi's or someone else? I don't know. It's been so long since I've been in that. I was down there on Main Street 2-3 weeks ago actually, but I didn't go that far down. So excuse me. So that's the law. If you pass under that tree on Main Street, you can't go in the temple in Jerusalem. You have to be sprinkled with the ashes of the red heifer. So that's probably the biggest reason why most pious Jews don't ascend to the Temple Mount, because we don't have the ashes of the red heifer. And even though theoretically there are parts of the Temple Mount that you would be able to visit and parts you wouldn't be able to, but since we don't know exactly where, there's turkey buzzards. Those things are so awesome. I wonder what they're eating. Some kind of dead animal. Again, my ADD acting up again. Excuse me. So again, time and time again, what exactly are we talking about here? We're not going up. We're not bringing a Korban Pesach. We're not bringing the Paschal sacrifice. How is it a biblical obligation that we that we hear Parshas Parah? And the answer is that's the power of Torah. We go to shul and listen to Kriyas Torah in shul, and we think it's just whatever it is, everyone, people don't see the forest through the trees when it comes to Kriyas Torah. I remember when I was a kid, I would have my Chumash in English, and I would follow along, and I would be able to follow. Just like the other day on Purim, we had one guy, I'm pretty sure he's not Jewish, but he likes to learn different languages and things, and he likes to attend different things. And he came to hear the Megillah, and he followed along in the Bible in English, and he was able to follow along. And I asked him. He said, yeah, he was able to keep up, and it was just like reading subtitles. And listening along, and you pick up. Where does it say Mordechai? Where does it say Esther? Where does it say Haman? And who, right? The guys didn't want to do that. I don't know. And there you go. And he was able to follow. It's not a big deal, So that's what I used to do when I was a kid. And I'd follow along the Chumash in English while I was listening to the Kriyas Torah. And I remember the Rav's son, he was mad at me. He said, no, follow along in the Hebrew. I didn't understand the Hebrew. Now I understand, I'm talking about, 20 years ago. More, 22 years ago. 21 years ago, whatever. 20 years ago, sure. and I was able to follow. I would follow along in the English and listen to the Hebrew. And I remember one friend of mine. He would always say, he's like, Kriyas Torah. That's the most boring part of the davening, because it's like to the Israelis it must be great because they're just listening to someone read, like that's what this guy said, and I was like, so follow along, get an English mission, follow along, and I learned a lot doing that. And how many of us realize, when we're sitting and listening to Torah reading, that we're listening to Torah reading? How many of us get excited? I can say, everybody gets excited, when it comes to 10 Commandments and Kriya Shema, But and maybe, a pasuk that we say a lot, Birkas Kahanim or Malach HaGoyel or something like, here. But we should when you listen to Kriyas Torah, you should be inspired by that. You're listening to God's word. Like Rav Tzvi Meir Zilberberg said years ago. I remember him saying, when we get to Parshas Parah, we're reading the book of Deuteronomy for a couple of weeks, a couple of months, and we should feel like we're sitting there and listening to Moshe Rabbeinu talk to us. What was it like being there when Moses was giving the sermon, which is the book of Deuteronomy. It's a series of sermons that Moses gave before he passed away, his swan song. And to sit and listen to Moshe Rabbeinu speak to us. We should be inspired like that. That just like Moshe Rabbeinu is speaking to us, just like Moses is speaking to us. But the thing is, really, ultimately, we're listening to Torah reading and we're listening while God is speaking to us. All right, the deer's not. That deer's over there. That deer's over there. You don't have to sit and stop. Maybe I did the same thing. There was no one behind me when I did that. This guy, I'm sure he's seen a deer. Anyway. So, we should be so excited when it comes to Torah reading. But not only that, the power of the Torah reading. It transports us, and it not only transfigurates us, it transfigurates our soul. When we read Parshas Parah, we are there and we're literally being sprinkled with the ashes of the Paraduma, and we are literally being purified and getting ready to go to the Beis HaMikdash to bring a Korban Pesach. And on Pesach, just after Mincha, we'll read the Seder Korban Pesach. Erev Pesach. We're being makriv the Korban Pesach. Because we're offering the Paschal sacrifice. Why? When a Shalma farms for Seder. The prophet Hosea says, the Navi Hosea says, that the offerings of our lips come in the place of bulls. Literally, the bulls pay for our lips. We'll pay for our lips with the bulls. When a Shalma Forim is famous for Seinu, the Satmarav explains. You think it's a big deal when Mashiach comes, you're going to be makar of a korban? What you don't hop is that right now it's a bigger deal that here we are in Golus and we're being makar of korbanos, not physically, not in Olam Huasiyah, but in the Olamas of Bria and Yitzira and Bria and Atzilus, which are more choshev than Olam Huasiyah. That we're being makar of korbanos mentally and emotionally and spiritually, that's more important than bringing physical sacrifices. I mean, we use in English the word sacrifice, but really another word is offering. But the word korban, it literally means to come close. And we can be, and that's the point, we are just as close to God at this very moment as we would have been in the ancient times in Jerusalem in the temple, when the Kohen Gadol was going into the Kodesh Kodashim. We can have that same closeness to God. Halachically, in this world, there are certain things that we're not allowed to do. And so we can't go physically into the Kodesh Kodashim. But nothing can prevent us from mentally and emotionally and spiritually going into the Kodesh Kodashim. You know, I mean, Rav Aryeh Kaplan, Zecher Tzaddik Livracha, he brought from the Sfarim Kodashim. I'm not sure what his makor is, but he probably has a makor there because he always brought Mar Mekoimis. He said, when you're meditating, the best place to be is in the Kodesh Kodashim, between the Kanfei Akruvim, right between the wings of the cherubim in the Holy of Holies, above the Ark of the Covenant. I mean, you don't have to be standing; you can be floating in your mind too, in your imagination, in your meditations. You're there at that point. You meditate on that point from where Scripture tells us that's where God spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu. That's where God spoke to Moses. Midbein Akruvim. And Yadaber Elecha, I speak to you from between the cherubim. This is a place of prophecy. We can be there. Nothing to stop our minds from being there. The same thing. Verbally, you can't say the name of God. We don't pronounce the tetragrammaton. But mentally, you can think about it. You can meditate on what does the name sound like. You should, and meditate on different permutations. Kabbalistically, there are different meditations with the different nekudas. And so chesed for keser is the comments under each letter, and for chochma is the pasach, and for bina is the tzeirei under each letter. For chesed is the segel, and for vura is the shiva, and for tiferes the choila, and so forth. Netzach is the chirik, and the hod is the shuruk, and yesod is the malupim, and malchus is stam. It's malchus, being makabel from all the others, just it is. And something that we're not allowed to say with our lips. We can think with our minds. A place where we're not allowed to go physically, we can go spiritually and emotionally. And so on the levels of the emotional and the mental, emotional, the spiritual, we are being, while we are engaged in the physical act of reading and listening to Parshas Parah. We are engaging in the spiritual meditation of being sprinkled with the ashes of the paraduma, being purified, having our souls purified. And when we go to be makriv the Korban Pesach, physically with our hands, we're not doing it. We're not in Yerushalayim. Even if we're in Yerushalayim, we're not doing it. But we read it when the Shalom affirms Hosseinu, and that's a higher level than if we were physically doing it. Because that's where the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. Because physically we did all this stuff, but emotionally and spiritually we weren't, maybe. And the whole point of all of that, at least on their level, those people, it was what it was. And I'm sure there were pious people who did. But the average person, no, they went and they did what they're supposed to do. They all went and brought the Korban Pesach. Did they feel so excited? They felt something, I'm sure. Do we feel so excited when we're sitting at the Seder and realize that when we're eating the Afikomen, we're mamish eating the Korban Pesach, meaning to the point where the Sanzerov, when he ate the Afikomen, he had to wipe his mouth because it physically manifested the meat of the Korban Pesach, that there was fat from a lamb on his mouth, from roasted lamb. He didn't put any physical roasted lamb there, but the power of his spirituality manifested there the actual meat of the Korban Pesach. And the excitement that we should feel about that should be exactly the same. Exactly the same. And like I was saying, that beautiful, beautiful teaching in Makor Chaim from my holy Zayda, the Chavos Yor, it just blew me away. Where he said, if someone doesn't know which way is Jerusalem, physically when you're praying, you're supposed to face Jerusalem. You don't know where's Jerusalem, so you face your heart to Jerusalem. But the problem is it says when you daven, in general, your heart's supposed to be facing heaven. So which is it? Where's your heart supposed to be? If you're physically facing Jerusalem, your heart's facing heaven, you're good. But your heart has to face Jerusalem, also face heaven. Where are we facing? Are we facing heaven? Are we facing Jerusalem? In our mind, what kind of meditation are we supposed to have? And he says, Yerushalayim Shel Mala, the heavenly Jerusalem, where there is a Beis HaMikdash. And depending on the girsa that you have, whether it's the Malach Machol, whether it's the Archangel Michael, or whether it's Eliyahu Navi, it's the Prophet Elijah, that they could be working together. They're being Makav Korbanos, they're bringing sacrifices on our behalf in the heavenly Jerusalem, in the heavenly temple. And that's where we should be meditating on. Not just the physical place, but the heavenly manifestation of the Ark of the Covenant between the wings. And that's where that's what we're literally doing this Shabbos. Is we are actually, that doesn't mean we can go physically up onto the Beis HaMikdash. But who cares about physically? It's spiritually that we're going. Because, why? Now then the person's saying, so then can I just in my mind put on tefillin? And the answer is, certainly, if you're going to go and do that already, and sit and meditate about wearing tefillin, you might as well wear tefillin while you do it. That's the first thing. The second thing is that all of these things are connected to the learning of Torah. You put on tefillin, we say l'shem yichud beforehand, and we say that we're putting on k'moshe kosav teresecha, k'shartam lo'yisal yadecha, v'ha'il te'tefis b'nenecha. That we make a declaration before God that we're putting on the tefillin like is written in your Torah. You should bind them for a sign in your hand, and they should be for frontals between your eyes. That we're standing there before God, and we're learning Torah, quoting the Torah. And that Torah learning teaches us that under these, you learn the halachas, you learn Shulchan Aruch, and you learn that you're obligated to put on tefillin. The difference is when you learn about the laws of the korbanos, and you learn the halachas, you learn we don't have a Beis HaMikdash, and there's Isser Bamos, and we don't have the Tahara of the Paraduma, and anyway, if physically we would go up on the Harabayas and try to be mark of Korbanos, would start World War III, Chas v'Shalom, and it's not worth the Shvichas Damim, it's not worth the human lives. So no, we're not only we're not obligated right now to bring Korbanos, even though it is a permanent obligation. It is something that in the future we may be and will be obligated to. But currently, under the current situation, we're not. And so therefore we are fulfilling God's will by not being physically makriv the korbanos. But we're doing the most we can by emotionally and spiritually, and like the Samarav said, the teaching of the Nevi'im, of the Navi Hosea, is that's really higher because the bulls will pay for the offerings of our lips, literally. We always translated the offerings of our lips, or the fruit of our lips, will pay for the bulls. But really, the literal translation is that no, the bulls pay for our lips. Meaning that the offerings of our lips are higher, and when Mashiach comes, we'll make it up. It won't be quite the same. Although the thing is, hopefully, we'll be able to combine them and feel it, really feel it. And so therefore we're fulfilling God's will by not building a Beis HaMikdash right now. We don't have a Paraduma. And anyway, Pekuach Nefesh. Shlomo Melech, to build the Beis HaMikdash, he had to be Shlomo Melech. He had to be the king of peace. Solomon, Shlomo, Shalom. David could not build a temple because he was a man of war. And so for anyone to think that this war-torn country of Israel could have anything to do with the everlasting holy temple, they're fooling themselves. It has to be. It can't be this way. If Shlomo Melech couldn't build the first Beis HaMikdash, except for if David Melech couldn't build the first HaMikdash, it had to be Shlomo Melech. Who would think? And I know there's a lot of the eschatologists, and a lot of Christians say, well, if there's a temple now, it'll be a tribulation temple. And the thing is, there are Jewish sources that say like that also. That there'll be a tribulation temple, the temple of the Antichrist. There are Jewish sources like that. Big tzaddikim who said that the wicked people will build a false tribulation temple, and that will hold back the Messiah from coming. So that means Antichrist, anti-Messiah. Antichrist doesn't mean anti-Yoshka. Antichrist means anti-Messiah. But there's more. Back to this discussion about what we do now and our devotions to God right now. Forget about the Beis HaMikdash physically. We have to build a Beis HaMikdash in our hearts. We have to connect ourselves, and we can literally, with our thoughts, be transported. Baal Shem Tov says, wherever your thoughts are, that's where you are. So you can be transported mentally to the Beis HaMikdash Shel Ma'ala, and literally be there when you pray. Standing, picture yourself floating between the Kruvim in Beis HaMikdash Shel Ma'ala, while the Malach Machol and Elyon Navi are being makriv korbanos to the Baruch Shalom. on our behalf. We're davening, and before we daven, we say korbanos, and we're connecting ourselves to that. We're transporting ourselves there while we make these devotions. It's not just about a physical, geographical Jerusalem. It's a spiritual, emotional, higher Jerusalem. That's where we have to be. We can physically be in Bethel, New York, and then be in the true base Kale in the house of God spiritually. That's where we belong. How many people are in the physical Jerusalem? I never visit the spiritual Jerusalem. And I don't just mean secular people. How many people with a beard and payas, with a strimal, with a black hat, in the physical Jerusalem? Never visit the spiritual Jerusalem. We can go lifnai v'lifnim. Like I said before, every person could be a Kohen Gadol. Every place could be the Kodesh Kodashim. Every day could be Yom Kippur. Doesn't mean physically, but spiritually and emotionally and mentally. That whatever devotion you do to God, because we have one God who's everywhere. Yes, physically we have the ideas of holiness and separation, because it's in the physical world. But spiritually and emotionally, we're unfettered. There's a story of a man in the Holocaust, and in its concentration camp, who would go around singing "ay ay 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 ay," and someone asked, "What step is ay ay ay?" And he said, "Ay ay ay. There are six constant mitzvahs." Mishnah Berurah says, and they are emotional mitzvahs. The Nazis might have taken my tefillin away, and my tzitzis away, and my yarmulke away, but they can't take away that I believe in God and I know there's no other gods. So that's the Aleph and the Yud. And then again, Ahava Yira, Aleph Yud, loving God, fearing God. Anochi v'lo yilecha, Ahava v'yira, Echad, that there's one God, L'Yisrach v'Elavavchem v'Chaynechem. It's another Yud. Ay ay ay, ay ay ay, ay ay ay. And I'm reminding myself that there are these 6 mitzvahs I can do any time. And I remember the first time I heard about those 6 mitzvahs from Shmuel Brown, Zilkazunzai, he was speaking between Mincha Marav and in the back when Eish Kodesh was still in the house, between Mincha Marav, and he was saying, when you think about these 6 mitzvahs, you're doing a mitzvah just like you're taking a lulav. And the thing is, these 6 mitzvahs are constant. You could drive around and say, I love you, God. I fear you, God. I know you exist, God. I know there's nothing else but you. Help me to have self-control about what I look at, what I think about. I know that there's only one God. You're fulfilling constant mitzvahs. And the same thing, there's the 6, or according to Sfardim, why not? There's 10. The more the merrier, things we have to always remember. We remember that because it's from Egypt. You fulfill the mitzvah. You remember Amalek, you fulfill the mitzvah. You remember Har Sinai, you fulfill the mitzvah. You remember the manna, you fulfill the mitzvah. You remember Miriam, you fulfill the mitzvah. You remember Shabbos, you fulfill the mitzvah. Hayom Yom Shlishi b'Shabbos Kodesh. Hayom Shlishi b'Shabbos. You mentioned Shabbos on a Tuesday. You're remembering Shabbos. Remember the Sabbath day. You fulfill the mitzvah. And so when there's the times when you can't do things, you have stomach problems. It might be a whole day. If you have really bad stomach problems, you can't put tefillin. It's horrible. That's the halacha. You gotta follow the halacha. Hopefully you find 2 minutes in a day that you can control your bowels enough that you can put tefillin. But maybe not. But like the stories of Rebbe Zisha and the Rebbe Melech, they were thrown into the jail, and they were, I spent a night in jail. Not just I work in the prison, but like I spent a night in the county jail, and Remember, we're all in a holding cell, a whole bunch of people, you know. It wasn't quite as bad, but whatever, you know. But in those days, you know, they didn't have flush toilets, you know. They had a chamber pot. Let's see if these bears or these pigs or whatever, man bear pigs are here again. So anyway, there's some deer. So anyway, the Rebbe Zisha was crying. There's a chamber, and Rebbe Melech said, "What are you crying for? They're going to think you lost your faith." And the Rebbe Zisha, there were two brothers. Rebbe Zisha said, "There's a chamber pot here. I can't daven, I can't pray." Rebbe Melech said, "Don't you understand what that means? The halacha is, the law is, you're not allowed to pray because there's a chamber pot here." Which means you're holding yourself back, you're having self-control, you're not praying as much as you want in your heart. You used to pray 3 times a day. How can you not pray? There's a chamber pot there, you're not allowed to pray. And it's out of your hands. You don't have control over that. Not only you're exempt, but it's every moment that you don't pray, and you have enough self-control not to pray, even though you're supposed to, you want to pray, you're obligated to pray, but you can't because of the situation you're in. So by the law, you're not allowed to pray. And so you're fulfilling God's will by not praying. And every second you're not praying, you're fulfilling the halacha. You're following the Jewish law. You're doing God's will. Rabbi Zisha was so excited, so malei simcha, he's filled with joy. Picked up the chamber pot and started dancing around with the chamber pot, and all the criminals, all the prisoners there, they started dancing. And the guard sees this, and he's like, "What kind of crazy voodoo are the Jews doing here? There's some kind of crazy magic. They're dancing with a chamber pot filled with excrement." And so and he's getting everybody else to dance. And the guard said, "Give that to me." He washed it out, and he said, "Anybody uses this chamber pot, let me know right away. I don't want this Jew to be doing this crazy thing that he's doing. As soon as anybody uses the chamber pot, I'm going to wash it out, scrub it out, make sure it's totally clean." And then he was able to say, "Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one." The same God who is with us when we're praying, the same God who's with us when we're not praying, because He's one God. The same God who was with us when we brought sacrifice in the temple is with us when we're not physically bringing sacrifices in the temple. And we should, so God doesn't change, and so we have to express our devotions by being with God, by remembering God. Oh, you know what? I think I am going to leave after my wife tomorrow, so I will park in her spot, and she will park in mine. See, that's how these things work around here. See, you hear what I'm saying? So meaning, even when I park in my wife's parking spot and she parks in mine, there's still one God, right? Only one God. The sun's in my eyes. There's only one God. Baruch Yotzer HaMa'aros. So, but the power of a day like Parshas Parah, that we are actually being sanctified, we're actually being purified, we're actually living with the power of of being sprinkled with the ashes of the paraduma. That's what's happening. It's nicht kein Kleinigkeit. It's no small matter. It's a big deal. And so whether it's the rice or the rabbanon, it's definitely worthwhile to have this experience, to be there with the paraduma, to be sprinkled with these ashes, to do this mitzvah. And so we should be zoiche to the koyach of this, to find this tahara, and to remember the lessons we spoke about of matar tameim and matam tahorim, and how that's worthwhile. Don't think you're too good, that you can't get down and go visit someone in their prison and give them some chizik. The Kohanim, the priests who would sprinkle the ashes, they'd get a little dirty themselves. Spiritually too, they'd have to go to mikveh. But it's worth it. It's kedai. So thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe. Comment. And learn Torah. Do mitzvahs. Go listen to Parshas Parah. Do what you're supposed to do. Let's be ehrlich Yidden. And do the Ratzon HaBoreh. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for listening. What am I gonna do? I got this for my wife. I thought she would like it. She gave it to me. It's like the gift of the Magi here. All right.